I'm so happy to welcome you to the first session of our breakout sessions on day 2 of Research Revolution. So welcome back. Thank you for being here. We have a panel today focusing on one of the most critical aspects of clinical research. In this session, which will be moderated by Andrea, we'll be discussing how leading sites, sponsors, and CROs, plus technology partners, are accelerating clinical research by seamlessly integrating multiple technology platforms, something I know that you all are, I'm sure, are working through. So please join me in welcoming our expert panelists to the stage.
Thank you. And before we get started, I'll let my panelists introduce themselves. I'm very thrilled to be here with all of you today. You want to go first, Carlos?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Is it working? My name's Carlos Orantes. I'm the CEO of Alcanza Clinical Research. So we're a research site in the United States, and also brand new to yoga as of this morning. And I found out I am not flexible, or as flexible as plastic.
Did anyone else go to yoga this morning? All right, Mr. Jones.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katherine Barboza. I'm hailing from Dallas, Texas. I work for Galderma, which is a SkinCeuticals company. We do prescription products in dermatology as well as aesthetics. And my role is in process development and process improvement within our clinical development team.
Okay. My name is Derk. I'm the founder and CEO of Castor. Castor is a company I started out of med school. I'm from Amsterdam originally, but now in New York. It's a long time ago. Castor is now a global e-clinical platform. We support about 15,000 studies, and a lot of my attention is on seeing how we can make all the pieces in the clinical trial ecosystem work together. And of course, specifically, a lot of attention is now going to how can we use AI in a meaningful way to reduce burden for the critical stakeholders who are already facing a lot of work. And I'm really excited for this panel because the only way we're going to do anything meaningful with AI is if systems can somehow communicate with each other, because otherwise AI is going to struggle just as much as a site coordinator. So excited to be here.
Thanks, guys. And hopefully you've noticed by now, we make a pretty intentional point of trying to bring sponsors and CROs and sites all together on stage today. We even have a tech vendor. So I'm happy to have great representation here for this panel, and very excited for you guys to be joining me. So to mirror that, just a show of hands in the room, who's from a site? Super. Who's from a sponsor? Okay, we got a couple. And CRO. Awesome. So great representation in the audience too, and I bet we have some tech vendors out there. Yeah, a few of those also. So fantastic. Great representation on stage and in the audience for this talk. So next, show of hands, poll, please. Who has problems with integrations? Yes, every hand goes up, right? So we know this is a challenge, and we're here today to talk about it. So I'm excited to be here. All right, so first, I guess let's just level set. I feel like a lot of times in the industry we use words and we don't all know what they mean, or they mean different things to all of us. So I'm going to ask each of my panelists, when I say integrations, what does that mean to you?
Scary, number one. No, integration for us at Alcanza, so we have, just to give you perspective, so we have 23 sites. It's an aggregation of 12 companies, and every single one of those companies had every single system that exists out there. And so integration for us is same system, same instance, so that the centralized support teams only have to use one system to properly support all of the sites that we power. So that's what integration is, and it's not easy to get there.
Thank you. Katherine?
I think it's short-term pain for long-term gain is how I think about integration, just because it's complicated, it's challenging, there's a lot of moving parts to integrating anything, but the goal is to streamline and to increase efficiencies. So in the long run, everyone wins, but in the immediate, it can be tough.
Yeah, for me, it's currently theoretical state that I haven't really seen yet, but a theoretical state where data only exists in one primary system. It's okay to have some kind of data being cached maybe, but ideally data and metadata exist in one system, and systems are aware of what is happening in other systems through events. So for me, it's really about a situation where we're not duplicating data across multiple systems. Systems communicate with each other without human intervention, and with that achieve a state of quote unquote like awareness, not in a sentient way, just in making sure, okay, well, you know, the CTMS is aware that a patient was added to EDC, and we didn't have to press any buttons for that, as a more simple example. So I think that's the desired end state of an integrated system.
That's awesome. So integration is the same thing, right? We all want data flowing, but we sometimes have it within a platform, within a system, or connecting a whole bunch of site systems, which is great. I love that you use the word theoretical, because that's probably how a lot of people feel, right? We know what we want to do, but how do we get there? Which is awesome. So what integrations have worked, like are in place, are working, and have delivered ROI for your organizations, if any?
Well, I think for us, and again, this is really focusing in more on the internal tech stack that we have. So first and foremost, putting all of the sites on the same system, same CTMS, same eReg, same eSource, same CRM. The payback is huge because one, the information is flowing faster, even though we have outside systems, right, to collect, aggregate, and display the data for analytics. But it's really the ability to support the sites with a lot less effort. It's still difficult, but it's a single system, single instance. We also chose a little bit harder path, best in class, as opposed to a soup to nuts system. So we have a different platform for CTMS, a different best in class for eReg, we use Florence, and a different one for eSource. And people ask me, why did you do that? And well, at the time, our team did the evaluation and they said best in class is the way to go. So the next step is now we have to interface them. But that has brought even a higher level of return for us because then now the data flows. So we're not doing multiple entry.
And I'm guessing that meant a lot of migration. Do you want to talk for a second about migration from old systems?
Yes, when you said the word integration, that was one of the ones that came, migration. And so we have a lot of legacy systems, and we have some legacy studies that are going to run off their course in the legacy systems as it's easier than to do a migration, less risky, less disruptive. Because at the end of the day, you know, for us, we wanted to, this is a good thing, but we wanted to do it carefully so that we didn't have a collateral impact, negative impact to the sites. But the return is just having the same knowledge of the same system, sending people to different sites is the same system, supporting different sites from all the folks centrally. So it's a world of difference. And we just achieved that, by the way, this month, the beginning of the month, flipped a switch on the last site because we took a while to do it right. And so now we're fully integrated. And we went from the theoretical to at least our tech stack actually being fully integrated, which is surreal.
That's awesome. Katherine, how about you?
We didn't do any of those things. We have lots of systems, and they all do their own thing, and they all have their own, issues. But the integration that we have worked on that has actually been quite successful, and it just happened, like hot off the presses. We integrated our TMF with Florence's EISF.
Ooh, exciting.
And that was a big win for us. And it was a very interesting journey to see, two companies working together, us kind of being in the middle going, we want this and we want that, and wait, can we pay for that? No, wait, hold on. And having to get all of our stakeholders aligned to ensure that it went as seamlessly as it could. It was a really good exercise in having that relationship, building on those relationships and seeing where we could go next.
That's awesome. Thank you. How about you, Derk?
I think one of the more recent exciting examples is a study that we're running that we're calling our self-driving trial. And again, all self-driving cars are human supervised. So I'm not suggesting that there's a thing as a trial that isn't human supervised. But it's a pretty elegant system where we recruit patients from pharmacy data, but also online. They then enroll themselves, they screen themselves. We do a check with an API system from the sponsor to make sure that they are on a list. So that's a nice integration, saves a lot of work, of course, to just make sure that only patients go through that are on a list. Then we go to automatically, after pre-screen, automatically getting into consent. They watch a video, they educate themselves, they consent themselves. Caveat, this is in a real-world evidence setting. So we have a bit more flexibility, of course. Once they make it through there, they actually go through a flow to retrieve their own medical records, also fully integrated. So we've integrated with the EMR systems so that they can pull their own medical records. And then that data gets pulled through our AI pipeline to push data into EDC for human review. And it also triggers an automatic PRO cadence. And then the resulting data from the study flows back into sponsor systems for analysis, or kind of in their BI solution or whatever solution they use for monitoring. And that's a fully integrated system with a lot of components that talk to each other, where patients are flowing through kind of automatically, where you can, as a human, supervise that that's happening well. And that's a pretty rare occurrence, but I think it's really showing tremendous, of course, sponsor ROI in terms of integrations. This is 2 of their systems, and the rest is all Castor systems, so quite an easy integration, I would say. But of course, the ambition is to integrate with way more platforms, like a Florence, for example.
Yeah, that doesn't sound theoretical. That sounds real. Like real.
Yeah, that one's real.
Yeah, that's cool. Also interesting to hear that's patient-facing, or the effect of that is patient-facing. Is that right?
Yeah, it's absolutely patient-facing. So it's just a lot of pieces that normally have a human in between to transfer data from one system to the next. We've basically just done that with integrations and allow humans to supervise that versus manually pressing buttons.
Yeah, that's very cool. I haven't heard of very many patient-facing integration use cases, even in our chats here the last couple days. So very unique. Yeah. How about some low-hanging fruit like SSO? Is that something do you think about that as an
sorry, I'm
integration?
deviating from your script.
That's okay.
You get upset with me. Yeah, no, we also do SSO. So I think we offer SSO to all our sponsors and sites, and also happy to play ball with other systems. Like the way we set up SSO, it's compatible with all identities, so you can have either Castor identity, is literally called Castor identity, or we can use some other identity. So all our site customers have their own system set up, but a lot of our sponsors are now also onboarding their own identity, usually some kind of Azure type thing. And so, but honestly, like a lot of the integrations, unfortunately, are still SFTP uploads, and every time I see that, it pains me, because we've had APIs for, well, since I can remember at Castor. But there's just nothing to connect to, So it's often like, I mean, in theory, this system has an API, but if you could just do a nightly SFTP upload, it's just easier for everyone. I'm like, okay.
Yes, that sounds familiar.
Does that count as an integration? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, even SSO, does that count as an integration? I don't know. It streamlines things. But how about you, Katherine? Do you have any kind of system interconnectivity at even like a tiny bit?
Sure. Yes and no. I think much to like what you were saying, it is always like ideal to do it that way, but then we look at what we actually have in our current infrastructure, and oftentimes FSTP is easier. It's just easier to do it old school than to try to do it with more streamlining of the systems. What I'm hopeful for, though, as we continue to modernize our systems, then those opportunities open up, because then the systems are able to speak to each other more freely. But with some of our legacy systems, you just kind of have to roll with what you've got.
It's a good point that both of you are bringing up, right? These legacy systems that maybe they're not really technologically equipped to make this process easy. So then it's a different decision of, do we change this legacy system, right?
Yeah,
Which
and I
has
think
its whole own problem.
Even worse, you get this sort of lowest common denominator problem, where if there's like one legacy system in the mix, it very often gravitates towards, well, we have to do an SFTP upload because of that one system. Yep. And so I think that's why it's so hard to solve. Like, you ideally have only systems with like open APIs that have some kind of shared language between them. But if there's one system that doesn't have that, very often you immediately revert back to the old school way of doing things, and that's why it takes so long, because you need to cycle through all these systems before you can truly say, okay, great, now there's no SFTP anywhere. Yep. It's tough.
Okay, now I'm going to go off script and say we've been hearing a little bit about sort of agentic integration. Like, do we have to do this the old way, or can we come up with a new way with AI? How is anyone leveraging anything really novel like that? Or have you thought about it?
I would say that we've been very, I'll say, intentional about our roadmap to prioritize first getting sort of table stakes, as I described earlier, all our current systems, and then the integration between the systems that we felt needed to be integrated or interface, like CRM to CTMS, CTMS to eSource. And now we're sort of going to the second iteration to what are some of the other elements that we can sort of bolt on, and then how does that bolt on occur? So we've prioritized patient recruitment and patient retention as next on our roadmap, and also upgrading our CRM to a different one. So there's so many things that you can do, and I think the advice that I would give anybody is don't do it all. You don't have to. And you know, resist the urge to just say yes to everything that could be great, because you're not going to get it done. And then if it's not done, you're never going to get the benefit of the greatness. And so, yeah, for us, AI, we're just getting started on patient recruitment, patient retention, contracts and budgets. That's also next on the list, very close to the finish line on that. And so we're really excited. And as I was telling Andrea this morning, from an AI perspective, I feel smart until the very next lecture or conversation I hear about AI, because there's so much I still don't know. So I think we're just scratching the surface there.
Yeah. What about the novelty of a site having a roadmap? I mean, how about that? Like, that you're not a tech company, right? But it's really like that's the world we're in today. That's the way you have to be thinking. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
Derk?
Yeah, I think the agentic question is very interesting. You know, the realization is we have a lot of fundamentals to cover. Like an agent isn't going to magically solve getting access to a system. You know, just having credentials. I'm not sure if you know what an MCP server is, but MCP is a cool concept where you basically wrap a natural language layer around an API, so agents can explore other systems and like figure out, oh, what could this system do? What could you give to me? But that isn't really a great method to operate in the clinical trial context, because it gives a lot of freedom. And again, just access control and 21 CFR Part 11 compliance and traceability and ALCOA, like those concepts, they don't naturally marry with agents. And so agents are extremely exciting, but there's a lot of like fundamental plumbing that we have to get through for agents to truly shine, right? So I think for an agent to shine in the clinical trial, you have to have a very robust pipeline of events across the entire study. And you need to have a very structured, clean digital version of your protocol that is the rule set, so that an agent can look at both and say, okay, I know what good looks like. I know what's going on in the study. I can now do something meaningful because I have connections to these systems. But again, that comes down to a lot of plumbing that like, if we're still doing SFTP files, again, you can slap a couple of agents around this process to reduce burden, which we absolutely should, but it's going to be very targeted, isolated use cases. I think the exciting prospect of an agent acting as a site coordinator, technically it's all possible, but we got to just get all the basic fundamental integrations out of the way first, because again, like I said, if you can't log into a system or you can't read the events from the CTMS, then you know, AI isn't going to magically solve that problem, or it will probably just make it worse, because AIs have a tendency that if context is missing, they just hallucinate the shit out of it. So that's a big risk.
A great point about access control and oversight, right? I mean, a lot of things that are possible with agents don't abide by those rules. So yeah, great point. Thank you. Katherine, how about you?
So I think for all the reasons that were just discussed, sponsors are hesitant. Cautiously optimistic, I think, would be the right phrase for, at least for us at Galderma, where there's a lot of evaluation of what's available and how does it impact workflow, how does it impact compliance, how does it impact the people that are doing the work, and what are the outcomes, like what are the benefits, like the risk to benefit ratio is a big one. So I think we are starting to embrace what AI can do, but it's very like pilot, let's try this in a small study, or let's try this with a specific functional group and just see what we get out of it. And is it worthwhile? Because it's also, you're investing time and money into these things too, right? So, and you know, we're all resource strapped. So it's always a very like, let's see how it goes. Let's see if this makes sense. Let's see if this, like, what it gives us is actually going to outweigh what we're currently doing, because oftentimes what we're currently doing works. It may not be working in the best way or the most efficient way or in the fastest way, but it works. The FDA likes it, you know? So that's I think how we approach a lot of these things.
I think that's a great point. I'm going to double click on that for 1 second. So the FDA likes it, right? Like, we've done this before. It's gotten approval. If we change something now, we don't know what they're going to say, right? So maybe just Give us your psychological analysis of that problem for a second.
So it's interesting because the FDA and any regulatory body, a lot of it is guidance, not requirement, but they're the gospel and we follow, right? So oftentimes when it's a guidance, there's room there to explore, what can we do this in a way that isn't exactly this way, but still follows the guidance? And so there is space there to play. But I think if you're coming from a more conservative QA, QC place, you're like, no, we don't play. We're not going to play. We're going to do it by the rules. And so that's a space where I think just reminding ourselves that there is a space, and I think the FDA has actually gotten better, at least the latest guidances have been way more open-ended, which I think speaks to this embrace of, well, technology is out there and there are things that we as an industry can be doing differently. We're allowing it, but then it's so open-ended that it's almost like ambiguous too. So then you're like, well, what really does that mean? Like even going from wet ink to electronic signature, that was like really hot, a few years ago.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I didn't mean to imply the regulators are the problem. The fear of the regulators is the problem,
Yeah,
right? And that's
exactly.
what Katherine and Barbara were just talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
I remember back when Part 11 compliance became a thing and regulators were coming in and asking all sorts of questions, and that was a whole separate set of fears. How do you prepare for that? And even still, we've had an FDA audit recently where now they're even asking for, let me see the validation documentation for E-reg, for e-source, and that still seems to be catching up. So I am curious, how is the FDA going to train and prepare their investigators when they go and do field audits? How are they going to approach AI?
Yeah, they're inspectors. Yeah, it's a great point. That layered on with new R3 regulations, right? There's a lot of
Correct.
change out there. Dirk, what do you guys think about from a regulatory perspective?
I think if you think of FDA and EMA, I don't actually think that they're the biggest problems. Like one example that I'm seeing right now in the Netherlands is the adoption of e-consent is being kind of slowed down because there's different groups, like privacy groups, who have suddenly decided that for e-consent we need like the highest level of signature you could possibly get, which is hard to build. People don't have access to it, would you just keep sending paper ICF forms to people's homes where you have absolutely no idea who's making a signature or sending it back? I think that that's a problem we see everywhere, that the standards for technology are usually like way higher than the paper benchmark. And I think the big regulators are trying to open the door to that, but at the same time, they don't want to regret it. So you see guidance coming out from the FDA on AI, which is actually very specific and very much tailored towards model development, for example. Nobody's developing their own models. Like nobody can beat the big players. So it's like, I think the FDA is still finding its footing. And I think right now, if the FDA would audit some, I think it's mostly happening at smaller sites, but like there's a lot of adoption of AI because sites feel the burden and there's very little validation that's been done. I think it would be a significant problem. I think we're kind of in an intermediary state where there's a lot of rogue AI products out there, and they don't come even close to what the FDA thinks should be happening when it comes to benchmarks and like how did you reduce bias and like all those things. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of a reckoning, and I do agree, like our whole industry has always been held back by the fear of the regulators, not necessarily the regulators putting their fist down. I've at this point now just accepted that is going to be how it is, and that you have to be very precise in the baby steps you take and show that it meets all those regulations that I just mentioned. Like, if you want to bring AI to mainstream clinical trials, the burden is on you as a vendor to just figure out how do you do this in a workflow that is recognizable? How do you do this within the existing compliance framework? Don't wait for some magical FDA intervention to suddenly white label agents in a clinical trial. It's not happening. And a sponsor wouldn't even believe it.
Right. Yeah, I like that you mentioned that there's some burden on the tech companies, right, on the vendors to start to help bring this along in the industry and explain how sites can validate it, for example, right, or have support for that, because there's a little bit of Wild West happening out there, and I like that you said there's going to be a reckoning. That'll be interesting. Well, that takes us to another topic of change management, right? So everything we've been talking about here sounds great, but also a huge amount of change from systems, from people, from process. How do you all tackle that as part of your integration journey?
slowly and painfully. I don't know.
Get your stakeholders on board, like get your buy-in. I think that makes a big difference. Really being able to build a case for something and showing, what the expected gains are, and being really honest about the challenges around that. And then ensuring that the decision makers feel informed enough to feel that they can have confidence in that change goes a long way.
Yeah, that kind of echoes some of Barbara's thoughts from this morning too, right? Everybody needs to know what to expect. Communication can fix a lot of problems. Yeah. How about you, Carlos?
Yeah, I think what I would tack on to that is your stakeholders, make sure you have representation throughout the organization at all levels, users, end users, along the entire chain, because if you just decide from the top or just from the bottom, there's multiple facets to that decision and angles, and you've got to have, this is a very, very important decision that once you make it, I don't want to say there's no going back, but I don't want to go back and redo all that. And then I think that gives you the best view, and we've learned a lot of things when we do that we otherwise wouldn't have paid attention to. So definitely everybody from the organization at different levels, not everybody, every person in an organization, but make sure you have different levels. And I think the other thing too up front is, why are you even doing this? Because if not, people just assume it's because, or just a change, or so I think outlining the why and then bringing them all in is still painful. It's still long, it's still expensive, but I think that's a great way to get things started.
Great. So those are awesome internal examples, right? How to get your own organization moving and all in the same direction. But I want to take advantage of the fact that you guys are all here and talk about sort of cross-organizational change management, right? So Carlos, you're dealing with your own staff and all your sites and all their staff, but you're also dealing with sponsors and CROs, and Katherine, same for you, right? And Derk for customers. So how do you help affect change across the industry there when you're working together? Or maybe what helps you at your organization when the other players, what helps you most in what they do?
I mean, the only thing I would say, again, focusing on the tech stack, for example, nobody cares about our CTMS, but they care about what we use for eSource. They care about what we use for eReg. And so just at least polling part of that stakeholder is getting their input, their feedback, and then just making sure now that we're using it, to make sure that we understand how comfortable or aware our sponsors or CROs are of the systems we use. But I think the other thing I would throw beyond sponsors and CROs is tech partners. I remember I said we went with best in class. And so it's important that we had conversations up front. This is what we're doing, the transparency, the why, the how. And I remember having those conversations, with every single one of our tech partners. Even though they're different companies, it just makes everybody aware, and we learned some things that we needed to do differently. So I think just awareness, full transparency, I think helps.
Awesome. Derk, did you have something to add there?
I think we have to accept that everything we do is essentially profit-driven. Like, this whole event and everything around it, and all the stakeholders, like in all the serious players, they have shareholders, and you need to perform well in the stock market or the CEO gets axed. Novo Nordisk is an interesting case study. And so with that realization, I think in the end, unfortunately, almost all these things come down to either we make more money or we save money. In my experience, if you don't have that completely nailed down, all these integrations and plans for the future and things we could do together, they don't really go anywhere. I mean, I've seen that time and time again. And it sometimes is an annoying catch-22, because we all feel like there's obvious ROI and there's always positive impact on the patient and on the sites. But if it's hard to really turn it into a money number, and by the way, this is not how I personally feel. Like, I love doing work just because it's better for patients, but at the same time, if it's a lot of work, very quickly, I'm like, okay, so how am I going to explain this internally, or how am I going to explain this to the board? So I think that's the harsh reality that we all have to face. Like, if you can't articulate how we're going to save or make money by doing this, at some point it's going to hit a roadblock. Even though you have like a whole group of stakeholders with the best intentions, at some point somebody's going to come in and say, well, how long is this going to go on for? This is costing us money. When do we see impact? Right? So that's I think my key contribution to that part. Like, just realize that needs to happen. And even though we all care about making trials better for patients and getting drugs to the market faster, it is a capitalistic system.
No, it's a great point. And Catherine, too, you mentioned a little bit about what's the value of what we're doing, right? What's the long-term impact? I mean, the fact is that this work takes time and resources and money, right? So you have to have a plan for what you're spending up front and all of those things versus what you're going to achieve in the end, right? And sometimes that can be really hard to calculate. You want to?
I keep thinking our CFO, what's the ROI? How do you articulate that? And I think that the problem is some of this is, I just equate it to, think about if you have a car that now you're going to have 3 or 4 engines, 2 or 3 transmissions, you're going to have 4 steering wheels. It's about going back to a single way to run that car. And so there is a bit of a return on investment, but to me it's almost table stakes. It's a must-have. And then you must make that investment and that commitment, and then you will start seeing the return on investment, which I'm going to get asked about, obviously. Just where is it? But that's the way I see it. We made that intentional commitment up front. This is where we need to get to, and obviously, not unlimited funds, not unlimited time. So we need to be, very judicious and careful about that. But that's a commitment. So I think we need to approach this, carefully. Is it good? What's the why? What do I intend to get out of it? But you may not be able to put a dollar value. And if you do, I would challenge you. How credible is it? How accurate is it? And so just be careful, because that might prevent us from doing a lot of good things that we should be doing.
It's a good point. CFOs like dollar values, don't they? Catherine?
Yeah, I was going to say that it really comes down to 3 things, at least at the sponsor level: objectives, budgets, and timelines, period. Like, that's all it is. And if you clearly define those from the beginning, obviously there's going to be wiggle room, so defining your buffers and defining where your windows are right up front is also helpful in change management, because you know where your limits are. And then going back to your question about sort of this organizational crossing over, I think understanding what incentivizes each group also plays a pretty significant role, because what motivates you as a sponsor is not the same thing that motivates the site or the vendor. And so understanding those things and then placing them within the larger picture of what is your actual timeline for getting this done, what is the actual thing you want to do, and how much money are you actually willing to spend, goes a long way in trying to make all of these moving parts work together towards a unified goal or a unified objective.
Yeah, you mentioned understanding the motivation, and you gave some examples that weren't necessarily related to integrations, but about site feasibility and learning, getting feedback from sites. And Carlos, you mentioned when sponsors explain why they want you to do something a certain way, that goes a long way for you feeling comfortable or being able to get behind the request. Is that, if you want to share any more details about those examples, you don't have to. But. No? Super. That's great. Cool. We just have a few minutes left here, and I want to end on the compliance note. If Nancy's in the room, she'll be happy. This is sort of this big impending change of R3, and Derk, you mentioned, e-signatures in different countries, and I think, Catherine, you guys work globally, right? So there's a lot of geographical differences. There's big change coming with R3. How do you think about that in terms of integrations or just your organization in general?
It's again another reality you have to accept. Like, it's if you want to run global studies, you're going to have global infrastructure, as in like infrastructure that is specific to a region, because otherwise, you're never going to be able to deal with all the data residency issues, for example. You're going to have to accept that we'll have at least a number of different types of signatures and stuff going around, and there's a lot of examples. I actually think that the clinical trial space is pretty good, because in the end, the FDA and the EMA are pretty much on the same page with a lot of these things, and like there's not another 21 CFR, there's not another GXP. I mean, I'm not that, like, China is kind of an odd one out, so I think that should definitely be part of the evaluation. You cannot get around China, so I think everyone needs to do their homework on, okay, how do all these principles translate into China? But yeah, I think it's just an acceptance. You are going to have specific solutions for specific regions if you want to be a global player, and that's the end of it, so just deal with it.
Yeah, that makes process unification kind of hard, right? I mean, that's the challenge.
And we've been fortunate just being in the U.S. today, but I see it coming. You know, we have colleagues, you know, Future Meds in 8 countries, Pratia in I don't know how many countries. So we're going to do what we do best is collaborate, reach out, ask for their help and support, just as they are trying to get into the U.S. But that's pretty daunting because we have enough to deal with just in the U.S. I can only imagine everybody who's global. So I'll be calling you.
And how about you, Katherine?
So I'm a process person. So for me, it's always gap analysis. What are we currently doing? Are we doing it, you know, the best way that we can be doing it? How does it actually fit the upcoming changes? What do we need to have in place, and what do we prioritize? So I think that's the approach we've taken as a company. You know, the downside of that is that it takes time. And then by the time you really figure it all out, a new regulation comes out. And then you're like doing it all over again. But that's also called job security, folks. So it's not a bad thing. But, you know, in the long run, you know, we're always trying to kind of work with what we've got. And that's just, you know, better understanding, like, again, what is absolutely the requirement? What is the thing that we absolutely have to prioritize? And what are the nice to haves?
And we deal with it. I like
Quick,
that.
a quick random note for the audience. Like, if you ever think about delivering text messages in like over 20 countries globally, just start on time. That's what I would say. Because if you talk about like a divergence of requirements, text message delivery is like up there. It's insane. So
Seems like it would be very easy.
every country has like different rules. Like, what can the sender ID be? How long can the message be? What can be the contents of the message? Do you need to register your message? Do you need to translate it? Do they need to? Is there an unsubscribe link? Like, it's the wildest sort of explosion of different requirements, country by country. Like, even within Europe, it's been quite of a mind-blowing process going through that. But that's just a random one to keep your eye on.
But a great, interesting example. Thank you. I think we maybe have time for one question, if there are any questions from the audience. Oh, all right. Joe, hit me.
Okay, so hey, great panel, everybody. Thanks. When it comes to interoperability and getting systems to talk to each other, I want to ask a question, I guess, to all of you. Carlos, have you asked any sponsors to take the technology stack that you have spent money on, invested, and built in that you own to connect to a sponsor system so that you can directly send them data? And what have they said? And then for you at Galderma, have you had sites ask you to connect their systems to yours as opposed to manually entering data into the systems you tell them to use? And Derk, have you had to deal with it as well? So start with Carlos.
So have we asked? Not yet, because we wanted to have everything integrated and in the same system, same instance. We've broached the subject, and we just need to find the right person to talk to, because it's certainly not at the PSV or the SIV. It's going to have to be a little bit more strategic conversation, no different than probably what we had before, use our e-reg versus yours, et cetera. But this is a little bit more intrusive. But I do think we've spent a lot of time, energy, and money, real money, and it would be a shame to not at least push that opportunity. And so that interoperability, it would be great that just take our data and put it into your system instead of having us use your system. So stay tuned.
No. No, it's usually the opposite. It's like, you know, the sponsor's asking the sites more than the sites are asking the sponsors. And I think it's, my guess is a little bit of the sites systems themselves, especially if they're like academic organizations, they have their own set of rules and, you know, firewalls and all sorts of things that maybe would make those links a little harder, or at least maybe not as streamlined. That would be a guess to why maybe we don't have those kinds of questions coming to us. And then the other thing is sites don't always want to, like, they want the sponsor to work, not the site. You know what I mean? So like they'd rather you just tell us, we'll use your system, make it easy for us. I don't want to deal. Like the question is more like, why do you have 4 systems in it, they don't talk to each other. That's the question we get more versus why don't you talk to our system? And so that's the challenge that we as a sponsor are trying to really solve by being more system integrated internally.
Yeah, it's a sore point you're touching on, Joe, because I've been trying this for a while and asking other vendors, sites, and sponsors, and I've not been able to pull it off, which is extremely frustrating. But I'm confident in 2026 we're going to figure it out for at least a couple of studies where we're connecting to either eSource. Of course, we've connected to EMRs, right? So I'm putting EMRs off to the side for a second. Everybody wants that, but also very hard to do that right. But the actual like connecting site systems to sponsor systems, that's been, I think, a problem that's been frustrating me nonstop for a couple of years already. I do expect it will be solved. I think somehow slowly we're edging closer to that moment where everyone sees, you know what, why wouldn't we push eSource data into EDC, for example?
I did hear that one site network that's pretty large ran the entire study, and the sponsor used their eSource as their EDC.
Fancy.
That was really exciting to hear.
Super fancy. Thanks for that great question, Joe.
I would say that they used an EDC as eSource then, but you know, that's a semantic piece.
Semantic differences. We'll have to agree to disagree on that point here. Please join me in thanking our excellent panelists for this session. Really appreciate their time. Thank you. And if I'm not mistaken, we have Nisha coming up to tell us what's next.
Thank you. Thank you all so much again for hosting this session. We appreciate you. We're going to take a networking break until 11:30. So there are a few things you can do during that time. You can go to our Floasis Wellness Room, take a little break, be in a room that smells like a great candle. You could also go to this room over here in our expo hall. We'll have some snacks. Our incredible exhibitors are there. Please say hi, get some points, and exchange those for Flokins, which are also in the back of the room. We have specialty swag and a few really great items left for you to take advantage of. So we'll be back at 11:30 here in this room with the breakout Reimagining Site Feasibility, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you all.